Welcome to Cyber909, your source for wit and wisdom in cybersecurity and beyond. On this podcast, your host, veteran Chief Security Officer and cyber aficionado Den Jones, taps his vast network to bring you guests, stories, opinions, predictions, and analysis you won't get anywhere else. Join us for Cyber909 Episode 5 with Bil Harmer.
Howdy, folks. Welcome to another episode of Cyber909. The podcast that we figure is going to be a little different, as we don't want to talk about breaches every 5 minutes and analyze them. We'd rather talk about the softer side of life. So I've got exciting guests to come on the show. And for episode 5, we've got Bil Harmer, operating partner, CISO, Craft Venture King. So Bill, welcome to the show. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure,
better job than me, perhaps.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Bil Harmer. I'm the operating partner and CISO at Craft. And just to give early context on what that means as an operating partner, I provide vCISO services to my portfolio companies. Early stage companies aren't hiring a CISO. If they need somebody with expertise, I'm here for them. I can do strategy, can do privacy, can do incident response, all the stuff that they don't have skills typically at, because we see a lot of engineers building stuff and they've never had to deal with a breach and talk to a lawyer. And then I do technical due diligence on investment, so in the cyber side. And then on top of all of that, I am the in-house CISO, so I run IT and security for Craft, David Sachs, and Jeff Fleur.
That's awesome. And oh god, I keep thinking I'm gravitating to the word awesome just a little too much these days. So if
your 80s is coming back out, isn't it?
Man, I tell you, it's so every now and again you catch yourself saying something and you're like, oh wait a minute, that's a habit I need to change.
I have no idea where I picked it up, but I now say defo.
Oh really? Oh
yeah.
Fuck. Yeah, I've not got that word in my vocabulary yet, so I'll try and not have it there.
It's way easier to type than definitely.
Jesus. Yeah. Defo is, I guess. I don't know. So one of the things that's interesting to me, because we got the whole virtual CISO, fractional CISO, real CISO. What in your mind is, I mean, you're kind of a blend of both, right? You're the real CISO for Craft, and then you're a virtual fractional advisory. So can you explain the difference?
Sure. When I was a real CISO at another company, I would handle certain obligations, getting my SOC 2 out the door, customer inquiries, incidents. Those are big things that you have to deal with. And during an incident, it was me, my ass on the line, and I was managing it all the way through. Thankfully, I didn't have a lot of them. When you do the virtual CISO for the portfolio companies, they will call and they say, I have this question, or I have maybe I think I've had an incident. And I did have a portfolio company call me with what they thought was an incident. And I sat down, I talked them, got them to tell me what was going on, and I said, okay, first off, let me have you delete any emails where you say you've had a breach or an incident, because you have not had a breach. They completely misunderstood the concept of what a breach was. Did they screw up something? Yeah, they screwed up something. Was it astronomical? Absolutely not. It was a minor error. It involved, I think, 2 of their customers. They contacted both customers. Everything was fine. But the good part about that is, as a virtual CISO, as soon as I was done giving them the advice, I hang up the phone, and now it's on them, right? Mm-hmm. You're not having to run through those pieces. I think, and I see this a lot in the industry lately in the last couple of years, a lot of CISOs either exiting their role, could be mergers and acquisitions, could be downsizing, and then other ones that are just going, no, I'm done. I'm done with not getting the budget, not having a seat at the table, because a lot of CISOs, they tend to report to CIOs, or God, I think I even saw a one that had CISO/senior director attached to it. And yeah, they're frustrated with that, and seeing things like Tim Brown case, where the SEC is naming a CISO in a lawsuit, right? So that kind of stuff is getting to the point where a lot of them, I think, are saying, I'm out. I can apply my skills. I can spread it across the board, reduce my risk, and reduce the stress. Because I think the burnout now on CISOs is less than 2 years. I think they're saying it's 18 months now.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think, I mean, I think of the legal side of it, right? So, and that's one thing even for me. So, going from running big enterprise security teams at Adobe and Cisco, and then I go to Banyan, and it's like I'm the CSO. So I was the CSO, the CIO, all rolled into one,
Yeah.
and trying to dodge being considered the legal DPA, right? I didn't necessarily want that on the legal side of my existence. And then starting my own company, we're now in a situation kind of like you, where our contract basically says, hey, we're giving you advice. Now, if you want us to execute something and we execute incorrectly, then yeah, we've got liability, right? So there's some areas where the virtual CISO is as zero liability or feeling
Very thin.
a feeling of zero, I guess, if you do it right. So so in your position as the virtual CISO with the portfolio companies, what do you see from a founder's perspective as the most common mistake they make from a security perspective? So you get pulled in, you start reviewing these guys. Is there a common mistake that most founders make?
Yeah, thankfully it's it's erring on the side of overcaution, which I'll take that any day. I think I was surprised, hugely surprised, that when I started sort of polling through the portfolio companies, how many of them had SOC 2s, right? That had actually implemented controls and were auditing them so early in the stage of the company. When I joined SuccessFactors, I joined in '07. That was our first audit. Back then it was SAS 70. And then you were, populating with control criteria from like ISO and NIST and a few other things. But that company had been around, like I was a customer of SuccessFactors in late '04, right? And they'd been around since '02. So that was like, you're talking 5 years without an auditable security methodology. Or at least, maybe they had an auditable security methodology, but, they weren't auditing it. Whereas now I'm seeing companies that are, just closing their A round with a SOC 2. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's fantastic, because at least you're building the basis. And that's what I always tell startups. And this might go against the whole concept of being a security person, but I tell them that security is not technically important in the early stages. And I always clarify that, right? So that way they just don't go, oh, free for all. What I mean is the implementation of security controls are irrelevant if you have no customers. So if you're doing ICP, it's pointless to be building in heavy security controls. And take everything I say with it, this is not a 100% coverage. There are certain things where you just simply have to build them, because if you're building a security product, you got to have security controls. But for the most part, when you build something, you're building it. You need to build a viable product. You need to get it out to market. You need to see and adjust and add on and build some customer momentum. But you also have to make sure in early stage that you build the foundation or the building blocks that allow you to add in the security later on, when the time is right, when it makes sense to invest the cash and the money and the time to manage a security piece of your application. So that's usually how I guide them. And to find out that they've done early stage stuff where they're getting SOC 2 compliance on operational security is fantastic, because operational security is operational security, right? That's the piece you have to start off with.
Yeah, and one of my serial founder friends, I was talking with him at Black Hat this year, and he said exactly what you said in that little clip there was, when you're an early stage startup, you don't have assets to secure.
Exactly.
You don't have money to protect. You don't have the investment at that stage. I tell people the cost of protecting the thing shouldn't be more than the cost if the thing went bad. So if you got breached and that shit costs you like 10 million, but in order to prevent that breach scenario, you're going to spend 50 million. I
Makes no
don't know.
sense.
Makes no sense. Maybe I'll just suck up the 10 million,
Now, early stage, if anybody's out there listening, I hope people are out there listening. If anybody is out there listening to early stage, secure your code, right? That's one of the first things you need to do. Secure your code, because early access to code. If I can get to somebody's code early and inject something that becomes the norm of the code, and plant a rat or something that gives me later access, that is exactly where I see a huge opportunity for threat actors to get in, right? So
Yeah.
because if the company blows up and becomes the next OpenAI, or becomes the next Yammer, or becomes the next SuccessFactors, you want to make sure that your code base is secure from day one. Plus, it's your intellectual property. So that's the piece that you're protecting.
Yeah, and I kind of tell people, don't get hung up on the concept of a big security program. I'm always like, don't stroll into a founder or a CEO and say, hey, we're going to do the security program, defense in depth, and at the end of it, you make it sound too big and expensive.
Yes.
Excuse me. And also, they don't need a security program. You need to look at, like you said, there's code, and then it's how do I lose access to my code, or the platform I'm building, the availability of the platform.
Exactly.
So there's a few things that you can narrow in on and say, okay, well, how do we protect these? And when you look at 80% of the breaches being users clicking links or creds being stolen, it's not rocket
science. And I have never built extensive, heavy software, heavy security programs. I just haven't. Now, I've also never, built a security program for Koch Industries or Ford. They're going to have a way, or Lockheed Martin, right? They're going to have way different requirements. So it's really, and this is, again, CISOs and security professionals that want to move up in the industry, learn your business, know where you make money, know what you can survive, know what is important to you. There was a CIO for GE years ago that told me this story, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant because it clearly articulates the risk methodology. He was talking to the board, and he asked the board, what is important to this company? And unanimously, without hesitation, it was intellectual property. GE is an idea company, right? They have ideas, they build big things, they make lots of money from it. And he said, okay, so which part of it? And somebody said all of it. And he goes, oh, okay, so I should apply the same level of security control to the washing machine division as I do to the jet engine division. And they sort of looked at him. He said, well, the washing machine division, I'm going to make up the numbers because I don't remember what they were, but he said the washing machine division is a $50 million annual business. The jet engines is $2 trillion. The washing machines come out every year, and the difference between us and everybody else is color and 2 features. The jet engines, that is a 20-year life cycle. So are they both equally important? They went, absolutely not. Jet engines are, right? And so it started to hone in on them, the understanding that if you work in the engineering department designing the next jet engine for General Electric or Boeing or whoever, your security is going to be brutal, right? You're going to have a company laptop that you cannot surf public websites on. You cannot install anything. It's highly monitored. You've got probably 3-factor authentication going in. Every time you log in, it's early stage logouts. It's constant monitoring, Big Brother, eyes on. But expect that, because I think understand your business. But if you're building the marketing plan for the next washing machine, right? If you've got the same security applied to that, you're going to piss off your users. They're going to find ways around it. You're going to spend money you don't need to spend, and your security program is going to go in the hole. And this whole concept of the brush that paints everything, right? And you see you still see these CISOs today, the purists, I like to call them, where it's my entire company does this. I don't make exceptions. And it's like, buddy, all you're doing is irritating the shit out of a good part of your organization, and they are finding ways around it.
Yes. And so it's I kind of look at this like I came up with this whole concept for 909 Cyber, which is pragmatic security. And basically for us, it starts with get to know your business.
Yep.
And then you're going through and understanding. It's not to understand what you have in the kind of SANS way, but ultimately the people, the process, the technology, the way you're overspending your money, the way the processes don't work and people just circumvent them because they're overly, and I think the thing I would say, they circumvent them because they know it's bureaucratic bullshit.
Yeah.
And when
or they may not even understand why you've put it in there, right? Because to them it's just just another thing. And the time when you get that one really important thing that everybody should really adhere to, they just go, no, it's just another thing from security. They're just dumping another thing on us, right? And there's no separation.
And I remember inheriting a team where the brand and reputation was Ivory Tower. And it's always like, in the name of security, right? And it's like, no, that's nonsense, because if you partner with your business and the different business units in your company and recognize that they're not all the same, and recognize that the way the business units are going to be successful, people within those business units have access to some more serious stuff than others.
Yeah.
But how you operationalize that in a way that's cost effective for the business, sometimes you're making a calculated risk that you're not asking for the extra friction, right?
Yep.
Now, I called this, I done a math equation, I was just pulling it up there. So governance minus BS, right? Because I think people do governance sometimes for checking boxes. So governance minus BS plus security, common sense, plus business strategy. I'm like, that's the equation.
That sounds good.
So, because ultimately, if you don't focus on the business strategy, and then you've got common sense security, then you're just checking the boxes. And it reminds me of the people that used to do the ITSM service management shit. They'd get that book, and they literally follow the book and the process that was in the book, rather than saying, hey, how are we running this business? Change management doesn't need a $2 million a year program. You can use it. You can use Excel if that's what works for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you're hearing this all the time now, and it's really interesting. The whole concept of AI. If you've ever listened to the All In podcast with David Sachs, Chamath, and those guys, Chamath is really heavy on this idea that AI will completely destroy the SaaS industry because a system of record is nothing more than a database and some encryption. And I'm like, okay, well, hang on. You just went way too far to the other side of this.
There's a leap.
Yeah, there are rules. There's intelligence that goes with it. But the concept is somewhat sort of valid, in that you could theoretically rebuild a SaaS program internally using an AI tool and agents. You may not be legally compliant. You may not have the best practices, and you're going to have a whole bunch of problems elsewhere, and you're going to spend a lot of money maintaining it. And that's what I think a lot of people start to misunderstand. But the concept of a system of record as a moat is really not there. It's all the things that get added onto it. Like, Salesforce has a ton of data, but the fact that their system of record for sales is not their moat. It's that they have 92,000 integrations with everything on the planet. And if you go to another application and say, okay, well, I'll use yours or I'll build my own, who's building all those integrations, right? That's truly the moat in that side. And security is the same way, right? We tend to do this thing where we try to build ourselves as the center of, and then create this moat around us, and we don't understand what those connections are. I always say that if you look at a security person, you're probably old enough to remember this. I'm not going to date you, but you remember the days with hypos, right? You'd find hypos in the HR would go through and find the high performer, high potentials. And they take those people and they put them on assignments, and they'd be seconded into finance, into HR, or into like the Canadian division, or into the manufacturing division. And they'd be moved around to understand and how all the departments and divisions were being run, because they were the future leaders of the company. These were people that they thought, out of the group that they're moving around, they could pick the next CEO, COO, or something like that. And they understood that they needed to understand how every part of the business worked in order to run the business. What we're coming to, and I think people are starting to get this, is that security is now the business as well. It always has been. We need people that are going around and understanding, how does HR work? How does manufacturing work? How do they make money? What can they survive? So that way you can build an overarching risk program. I don't know if I'm considered crazy, but I think the title Chief Information Security Officer should just go away, really, because security is a tool. Those are the tools we use. Those are the levers and the dials and the things we do to reduce the risk to the company. End of story. There's no other reason for security that I can think of. And again, this is 90%. There are some oddities and exclusions to that, but you address those separately. But when
what I was going to say, what kind of title would you expect us to have in the future?
Chief Risk Officer.
Chief Risk Officer.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you should go around and learn every department, understand how they do business, because you'll understand the friction, you'll understand the challenges, and security should be a way of protecting data and the correct dissemination of information at the correct time, whether that's PII, marketing information, financials before, intellectual property, whatever. You're controlling access to stuff. And you have to understand how people work. You have to understand the frictions they have, because everybody's human. And unless you take that into consideration, if you have no empathy, you will never survive in security. The ones that are security lockdown,
religious nuts.
I was trying to avoid saying fanatics or Nazis or something like that. But those ones that are, it is our way or the highway, are the ones that usually have the worst breaches.
But the problem is there's so many people in the security industry that are on their ivory tower that are like, I just think of it like they think that they should be adding friction. And I'm like, holy shit, no. The minute, and my old boss and I used to have this conversation, which was along the lines of, if you make the process and the experience cumbersome, they will circumvent their way around it.
Yeah.
Or the policy or whatever. And the reality is then you should be looking at what you put in place and say, is it a way we can do this where the friction is less? And even the cost of it to the business is less.
Yeah.
And that for me, when we were at Adobe, I thought that was a great, because you have to become really creative when you start doing this stuff. Now, in order to achieve that, right, you start looking at the technologies that we keep throwing around. And I can't remember, there's now over 3,000 security vendors. I can't remember where I got that silly stat from. But when you're thinking about a defense in depth strategy, do you like go for best of breed? Do you look at suite, platform solution plays? I mean, where do you fit in that scale?
It really depends on the business I'm working for at the time, right? So, if I were looking at success factors back in those days, I'm looking at some platforms, simply because its vendor management is a huge part of it. Interoperability is absolutely important. And I know from history, and, again, I'm going to bring my biases to the decision, but my historical piece was, whenever we built stacks, the biggest problem with the stacks is the components never talk to each other.
Yeah.
Or you had to do a lot of work to make them talk, and then an update would come along and break stuff. And so I would start to, take a hit maybe on some functionality in a particular area. But if I could have the stack, if I could have 80% of the stack as a single vendor, then I could work and see what the future is. And then I would look at the business and go, okay, well, over there in that section, I need something a little bit more. But I would find that baseline, right? Just something that's baseline that I could implement and manage my controls across the board. And then you get to smaller organizations where they're a little bit more nimble, but they have less requirements. So you sort of look at best of breed and go, okay, look, I'm going to take, and this is a really good idea, a really good topic, because I'm starting to see this change in endpoint, right? So for a long time, we were going, don't put anything on the endpoint, stay away from the endpoint. And I got that. We were overloading the endpoints. And then we saw sort of this move. And as SaaS solutions took off and became pretty much predominant in any new company being built today, the endpoints aren't doing very much, but they were constantly being upgraded. Like the new Mac M3s, those are standard deployments. And yet, what are they doing? They're running a browser. So then we saw the advent of the browser security, the islands, the talons, stuff like that. But what I'm starting to see now is like these hyper-converged endpoint securities that come in that can sit on the endpoint, go way beyond just a browser plugin. Like if you're doing browser plugin, that's kind of pointless, because you can go to Reddit and there's teenagers that have zombie programs that can hang browser extensions and get around them because they want to look at porn on the Google workbooks that they have. But they're bringing in sort of 80% of security. It's not like a full Zscaler suite or a full Prisma suite, because those have very specific use cases. They're not needed for everybody across the board. But if you can lop off a majority of the things, you can do some DLP to address the AI issue coming. So you can stop intellectual property, like code being uploaded, or at least stop keys, tokens, passwords. You can stop social security numbers, the basic gamut, before it ever gets in to the prompt. You can do URL filtering, you can do anti-phishing, you can do typo squatting. And like you said earlier, it's people clicking on shit that's 80% of this problem.
Yeah.
You can lop off so much right there. And because the laptops aren't, or the endpoints aren't being used heavily, using a little bit of resource and less than 1% is absolutely acceptable nowadays. So the hardware's been getting better, the software's been getting better. And then these hyper-converged agents are now building huge integrations. Like that is the key to them, because if you've got an endpoint agent that is running like an eBPF, so you're not threatening the kernel, you can have it running local. And that's actually, I heard Microsoft is doing that with Defender. You can have it running local. You can have it feeding information out about posture status. So you can almost get into auditability. You can start feeding audit systems like Vanta or any of the others with automated data updates. So that becomes faster, easier, and more simple for the IT organizations. And they're taking on a lot of that heavy lifting, which allows your IT and security people to actually start doing more specific and better use actions in the security world.
Yeah, I've been saying to people for years. I remember talking to Todd at Okta about one day you need an agent. I'm like, if you want to take control of the identity from a device to an app to whatever, like you kind of need an agent if you want to do it good. And that was over 10 years ago I said that. I think now they have one, because in order to do passwordless, in order to do posture checking, in order to do some of these things, having the agent on the device gives you way more control. And browser plugins, they're great, but if you go to a larger enterprise, they're not used. You can say we're standardized on Chrome or whatever, right? But the reality is they're not going to do that. End users will use Chrome for some stuff, and then some other browser,
Thunderbird,
stuff, like whatever.
I've been hearing that like Palo can't even give away talent because people are like, I'm not going to replace the browser. I need Chrome, I need Safari, I need whatever the hell Windows. What does Windows use these days?
I don't know.
I still call it Exploder.
Yeah, I was going to say I still call it Exploder, but Edge? I don't know.
Oh yeah, okay, Edge, right. So you've got everybody's out there using their browser, like the preferred browser. And again, like that's human behavior. You get very comfortable with a particular browser and how it works. I did a switch to DuckDuckGo for a while to see what it was like.
Yep.
It works,
but
it's different. And it just felt wrong, right? And I just found myself going back to, Chrome. It just, I know Chrome works, and I don't have to sort of look at something not working and think, is it Chrome or is it me or is it the app?
Yeah. Well, that's it. And the plugins, I tell people about browser plugins and be very wary of how and where you get them, right? But Chrome, the plugins for Chrome are good. I very rarely use Safari now or Firefox, but Chrome's my go-to. Yeah. Now, we're kind of getting close on time, man. It's easy to shoot this shit together for quite a while. Couple of things. New CISOs and their tool strategy. What would be the one word of advice when they're approaching that?
New CISOs and their tool strategy?
Yeah.
Usability, right? Balance everything 50-50, security and usability. Because if you can't use it, or it's hard to use, or if it's even confusing, and I tell this to startups that are building security tools, if it's not intuitive, it's frustrating. If it's frustrating, I'm not using it. It's just we have gotten to this instant gratification world of TikTok and Instagram, and it's swipe and get, and it's all Netflix's fault because people don't have to wait at the store to get the DVD return. Yeah, well, you remember the days in you'd have to go to the video store and you'd have to put your name down to wait for somebody to bring a copy back, and then Netflix came along and started sending you discs, and Now it's just on demand. But that's the world we're in. So if I go into a tool and I go, oh, I need to get some logs from an endpoint, and I cannot, if I see a thing that says logs, I'll click on logs because I need logs. So logs should be in logs, right? But logs aren't in logs. If logs aren't in logs, and I got to go start looking for it, and then I got to go click 3 dots to find something in a hidden menu, I'm frustrated at that point. So I would say, if you're building tools, make it simple. If you're buying tools, make it simple and usable.
Yeah, that's great. And I would add that from a tool strategy perspective, if you have fewer tools that are fully deployed, that's a lot better than many tools not deployed very
Absolutely.
well. That would
Absolutely.
be I've shut down more tools along the journey just because you end up having 2.5 tools per person.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
That's a hard thing as a company grows, and you want to
and don't worry about don't worry about nation state. You cannot survive a nation state attack. If they want you, they will get you. So lower your temperature a little bit on that side, raise your temperature on the other bit, and meet yourself in the middle.
Yeah. Nation state, unless it's Scotland's a nation, because I don't think I can't imagine people in Scotland going around hacking people. We're quite a fair nation that way. So AI, I want a couple of things on AI. Yeah. So what do you see for the next 12 months in the AI landscape? 2024 was playing out a breeze. It's getting fun. But what scares you the most and what excites you the most?
I guess I would say that this is the era of the AI app. Like the whole infrastructure play has gone kind of crazy. OpenAI has reduced token costs like by 98%. So it's kind of a race to the bottom on that side. For me, I think the future of security rests with AI to a certain degree. And that would be across, when you think about security, we talk about alerts. I try to refer to them as data points, not alerts, because if you talk about alerts, everything's an alert. Alert becomes alert fatigue and blah, 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 blah. But if they're data points, then you can do something with the data, consume the data and make decisions on the data. So it's a little bit different perspective on how you're going to handle it. But there is so much of it. There is so many data points that how do you do it? And AI is, some sort of machine learning is the only thing that will allow us to consume that much and make decisions. But taking that a step further, if you have people that work for you, right, and say you've got CrowdStrike and Palo firewalls, for just picking two, and you hire somebody, and the person is a great Palo firewall person, and they know CrowdStrike, so you put together a program and off you go, and then they get a job somewhere else and they leave, and then you put a job out saying Palo and CrowdStrike, and you get somebody, and what they are is a little bit more biased in their skill set to CrowdStrike. They know it. They're an expert in CrowdStrike and they know Palo. Your security posture just changed. And it changed potentially immeasurably or irrevocably, but it did change. And now you don't realize that though. And that's what we have is we have all these different tools, all these different skill sets. And then you've got different personalities, different philosophies, different beliefs, different ways of doing things. If you can train an AI on the risk methodology that you want to apply to your tools, and it can consume and understand all of the tools and not forget how they work. Day 1 to day 5,688, it still understands the tool. Mm-hmm. Your security posture just got a shit ton better, right? Because now you can start looking at it, and you get that thing at the end of the year where somebody says, okay, cut your budget by 15%. Go find some tool that you got to get rid of. If you could go to your AI and say, look, scenario model this for me. I need to reduce cost by 15%. But I want to maintain my security posture. And if you can't maintain my security posture, I want the least reduction in security posture from a risk perspective based on my business, based on where I would potentially lose money or whatever it is my issue, and give me 3 choices. The amount of time and effort it has taken me to do that kind of scenario modeling when I look at my tools and try to figure out, am I going to pull out Proofpoint and rely on something else and then run the scenarios on it? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I may be looking at, okay, I'm going to use Intune versus Kanji. I don't know Intune, so I can't even make that decision. I can only guess at it. If you could have a system that does that, it doesn't matter who's technically coming in because the skills are not as important at that point. The system understands it and you maintain consistency all the way through the company's life. And that's what I'm most excited about. I think that's where we will see huge benefits in the security world.
I don't even know if there's an AI company that exists that's actually making that yet, Bill. So hopefully, maybe somebody will watch this.
I've seen little bits of it. There are companies out there that are doing it. There's one, Reach Security does it sort of for your controls. They look at your security controls and say, here's your risk, and then if you're going to adjust, but then take that concept and just expand it. And I call it CISO in a box, right? We need the CISO, the technical side of the CISO, in a system that can consume vast amounts of data and make incredibly complex decisions based on that vast amount of data, and then somebody to govern that decision.
Yeah, wow, I can't really imagine. I guess I can imagine that being somewhere in the future, but I can't see it in the near future. I think most of the people that are building stuff like this, they're focused on one thing, like here's your cloud posture, here's your AWS, or so. I think there's a bundle of them, but we'll get there.
Get into that agentic AI, right? So the agents running agents. Now, when you get to agents calling and building agents to run agents, I think that's when it manifests itself.
Yeah.
Because sooner or later, all your different tools are going to have AI agents that make them better. Hopefully, they can make them worse. You never know, but they're all going to be better. And then there's going to be a person that's saying, okay, I'm looking at all these agents and I'm tweaking, turning the knobs and flipping the switches. And then somebody's going to go, why don't we just have all those agents talk to an agent? And then somebody can just look at the agent. And that'll be like a CISO dashboard that's AI driven that controls all of the agents, or can at least talk to them and consume. That'll probably be the first way it comes out. It comes out as some sort of dashboard that highlights all of the things from all these other agents, brings them up and surfaces it. And if anybody's out there, hey, cut me some shares on whatever I just said.
Yeah, help a man out.
Little bit of equity. I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah. So the summer is over now because we're in October. So what was your funnest conference of the summer or the year? And then what was your best personal adventure?
Funnest conference this year was Black Hat, mostly because we at Craft sort of tried to say, how do we get involved in Black Hat from a security? So we built our CISO network. We just launched it last week, actually. So if you go to craftventures.com, you can actually see our CISO Advisory Council. And one of the things that we were doing was how do we get involved? And, I've been doing Black Hat for years, and getting people's attention to Black Hat is really difficult, right? You can go rent the racetrack, spend $250,000 to have the track for the day, race cars. You get like 10 minutes of people's attention, and you're just culling a list of names and email addresses for future sales. So we're trying to figure out, how do we do this? So we rented a private jet, and I flew 8 CISOs from the Bay to Vegas, because everybody has to get to Vegas anyways. Yeah. Let me pick up the tab. I'll be the Uber of the air for you. So we rented a private jet, flew 8 CISOs out, had a fantastic time. I bought four fantastic bourbons, did a TSA approved travel kit, craft brand, and threw some bourbon in there, and we drank bourbon and shot the shit for a couple hours. So that was the most fun.
That's good. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Personal adventure. It's been a hell of a lot of travel for me this year. And it's really a toss up between scuba diving in Tahiti and standing at above base camp at Mount Everest.
Oh, that's right. You done. Yeah. So what was that story like? How was that experience?
I would say, if anybody ever has the chance, or if you're trying to look for an adventure in your life, go to Everest. I didn't do the hike, and I still want to go back and do the hike from Lukla up to base camp. It's I think it's 7 days up and 3 days down, because you only hike up on every other day because you're acclimatizing. We only had 2 days to do the whole thing, so we literally took a helicopter to Lukla and then took a helicopter from there up to a place called Kalapatar, which is 18,500 feet. And you get to stand there for about 5 minutes because you are slowly dying. You're in the death zone. You have not acclimatized, and you're just in awe. Like, you're standing there at 18,500 feet looking up another 10,000 feet at Everest. It's just beautiful up there. It's quiet. You can hear things from like massive distance away. It's so still. And then we spent the night at the Everest View Hotel and woke up to watch the sunrise over Everest. And so, it's phenomenal. And the Nepali people are the nicest people in the world, just phenomenal people. And the culture there, like all the things you can see and learn, absolutely so worth it. So anybody ever out there thinking about it, go to Nepal, go up to Everest.
And didn't you record a podcast
We
when
did
you were on that trip? What
Yep.
was that like?
That was trippy because you're sitting there and again, you're still sitting at 14,500 feet and like zero acclimatization. So there's a lot of Excedrin being taken. There's a lot of what I've forgotten what the pills they were telling us to take to avoid altitude sickness. But you're sitting there and you're discussing risk. That was the topic that we wanted to talk about because we were doing risky things like flying to 18,500 feet in a helicopter is risky no matter how you cut it. But it was so surreal because you just kept looking back and like right there's Everest. That is Mount Everest. You've got everything from people climbing that day because it was a beautiful day. So they knew there would be people on the mountain climbing. It was right in the middle of the summits season. So people had already done all their training and were going up. And you knew there's 300 dead bodies up there, right? They call it the Rainbow Road because of all the snowsuits that come out through the snow when it starts to melt. But it was the most surreal thing I think I have ever done. That
Wow.
I'm somehow in my career, it has brought me to Everest to discuss risk. And Security Pal, one of our portfolio companies, they sponsored it. Pucar Hamal is Nepali, and during COVID, the Nepalese people could not do what they would normally do, and that was they get trained and then they go to India or Singapore or other places to work. They were sort of stuck in the country, and he thought, what better place to build an outsourced BPO but do it in Kathmandu? So he has since built this phenomenal office there with I think 130, 180 people that are all doing amazing work. So we went to see it. We went to see how they were doing, but also to do this piece. And I owe a lot to Pucar for inviting me on that trip, and it was an amazing journey.
Wow. Yeah, that's it. When you look at your career, there's always places you visit, and I remember when I was a kid going to like Asia for the first time, and I was like, and I was mid-20s, so
Yep.
I was going around doing this project of Novell migrations back in the day, and literally I'm like, holy shit, like this job that I got is getting me to Singapore and getting me to Hong Kong and Tokyo, and you don't sometimes we don't take a minute to stop and just appreciate or be grateful for the things that we have. We're humans as a society, we focus on what we don't have more than what we have.
Yeah.
And I said there to everybody, I'm like, take a minute, take a breath, look at what you've got, be grateful for what you've got, and then recognize, you're not in competition in life with anybody else but yourself.
Yeah, the personality type I think that ends up being a CISO strives for the next thing, which is what drives us. I don't know about you, but it's always been me. I've never been satisfied with where I am. And I'm getting to a point in my life where I'm learning to be satisfied that I love working for Kraft. I love where I am, and I'm not looking anywhere else because I have 30 years behind me in this industry, and now I'm putting that to good use I'm still learning new things. I'm learning how the investors work and how to be an investor and what they think, because that's my business of how to protect them, how to help them, how to make the business grow. But yeah, no, I totally get you. 2019, the year after my father passed away, I got to speak in Belfast at Big Data Belfast. My family is from Belfast. My father's from Hollywood. My mother's from West Belfast on the Falls Road. And I think it was the Ulster Times caught wind that I was coming to speak and that my family was from there. And they did an entire page, like a full one-page spread in the newspaper, old newspaper, like actually pick it up and infect it. That's it right there framed. That I was able to sort of, they called it the homecoming for an IT guru, because my father left Belfast, came to Canada, became an IT person in the early days, like working on UNIVAC systems, like that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Built some of the original systems that suffered from Y2K. So he actually came out of retirement for Y2K to help companies through that. And he, just before he passed away, I had been invited to do this in 2018. So at least, I completed that mission that he knew I was going to go speak, but I didn't get to do it in 2018 because they actually, it got canceled. My travel got canceled, so I couldn't get to it. So I said, 2019, if you invite me, I'm coming. I'll pay for it myself if I have to.
Yeah.
And Zscaler, they're like, absolutely not. You're not paying for it. Go do it.
Go do it.
Honor your father and, do some Zscaler work while you're there. So.
That's excellent. And also great places to visit as well. I mean, it's a lot. There's usually a lot of work in there, but it's always good to do some personal and some growth and stuff. Bill, it's been a pleasure as always. Way over. We could cover a billion more topics, but
absolutely,
I appreciate your time. Great seeing you. So. Thanks, everybody. If you like the show, I guess, subscribe, like, share, do all that normal stuff. I'm Dan Jones, Bil Harmer. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for listening to Cyber909. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and don't miss an episode of your source for wit and wisdom in cybersecurity.